Hey everybody, I'm Alex Vidor, part of the leadership team here at Franzy, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We're flipping the script and interviewing our very own CEO and co-founder, Alex Smereczniak. All right, so Alex, I've got a great list of questions here. Fun to be interviewing you, not the other way around. So let's jump into it. So the first big question is, tell us about the brand that you've partnered with.
Yeah, so I figured if we're going to run a platform where we're helping people buy franchise businesses, I also have to put my money where my mouth is, right? And I believe in the franchise business model. And so for a number of years, I've looked for the right concept for me. Which franchise business should I get into? And I knew how demanding Franzy was going to be. We all know it's a 60, 80, sometimes 100 plus hour job a week. And so I needed something that was more passive. And that's kind of a misnomer in franchising. You'll have a lot of people say, oh, it's passive, it's mailbox money. But the reality is most businesses, especially the first 6 to 12 months, are pretty demanding. And then I met this group at a brand called Another Nine. It's a indoor golf simulator franchise. Think of it as like Anytime Fitness, where you can fob in. You can go at 3 a.m, 2 p.m, whenever you want. No employees, no food and bev. You can go play, sim golf whenever you want. And so I saw that and I thought I think I could actually do this somewhat passively. I still have to find the site. I still have to find a GC and work with architects and subcontractors, et cetera. But once it's up and running, it's someone really maintaining, cleaning, and resetting the room, which guests are asked to do, and there's a fee if they don't. And so it's a relatively straightforward business. Of course, some marketing and driving interest and traffic and partnering with local golf courses. But as far as passive goes, it's one of the more passive businesses you can get into, Another Nine. And so me and a partner who's going to be more boots on the ground can handle even some of the initial work off of my plate, are going in on it together, and we're developing 5 locations in Minnesota.
That's awesome. And I know that golf is very fun, but does that correlate to your skill in the sport or more of a passion project?
I need to get one in Charlotte so I can practice more. But no, I have an 18 handicap, so
Well, that's what the golf simulator is for, right? Well, let's go back to that belief in the franchise system you referenced. So from my understanding, that comes from your career and your history. So tell us a little bit about your life and career leading up to this franchise decision.
Yeah, so I really got into entrepreneurship in college. I went to Wake Forest, where Bennett, who works with us, is also going to now. And I ran this laundry business called Wake Wash. It was door-to-door laundry and dry cleaning, pickup and delivery. And I fell in love with it. I was like, I'm learning more doing this than my financial modeling class or XYZ marketing course. So I was hooked on entrepreneurship at that point. We sold that business when we graduated. I went and did consulting for a year and a half. My parents would have hated me if they helped get through a 4-year degree just for me to go run a laundry company or do something purely entrepreneurial. So I worked for EY for a year and a half. Didn't love it, but loved the people I worked with and some of the stuff I was learning, but knew I needed to do something entrepreneurial again. And so started up another laundry and dry cleaning business in 2015, 2016, when all of these Uber for X businesses popped up. So you had like Instacart and Shipt, Wag and Rover, popping up. And we thought, someone needs to do this for laundry and dry cleaning. Why not us? And so we started that business over the course of 8 years, scaled it to $33 million in capital raised, over $15 million in annual revenue. And then started franchising part of that business in 2021 when we realized we needed to start building more physical laundromat locations to support the volume. So I knew nothing about franchising before 2021, outside of being a customer of a lot of them, having some friends whose parents had franchise locations, but never directly knew much about it myself. And then we had to go through a crash course, obviously, to franchise our business. So what's an FDD, a franchise disclosure document? How do you sell units? And do you do area development agreements where you sell a ton, or master development agreements where you sell out a whole state? Or do we sell ones and twosies? Do we structure our item 19 in financials this way or that way? And so really had to figure out a lot about franchising quickly. And within our first year, we sold 118 locations relatively quickly, and then had to go build out teams to support site selection, training, marketing, etc. And so that's where I really got a crash course into the franchise business model and what used to be this kind of, I don't know, seedy underbelly. Honestly, franchising gets a bad rep because I think there's, some bad actors and, brands that don't make it, and, a number of things that I think go without additional context. And after seeing how big of an opportunity there was to flip that script and create more transparency, democratize ownership, and just create a much better way to get into entrepreneurship and business ownership, that's where the idea for Franzy came, and my interest in becoming a franchisee and just being more involved in the franchise business model.
That's great, and very obvious that the entrepreneurship spirit flowed through all parts of those, but that's also a main part of Franzy's mission, right? That is the goal. What's the Franzy big goal?
Yeah, so it's called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. Our goal is to create 1 million entrepreneurs over however long of a period it takes, because I think anyone who's ever had that taste of entrepreneurship, business ownership, whether it's being early at a startup or buying a car wash or buying a franchise or even owning a short-term rental, you get this taste and sense of, fulfillment that I think is hard to replicate without experiencing it. You've worked at tons of startups, you've been involved, you guys have rental properties. Like it's that game almost of iterating and testing new things and getting to move fast. And so I want to give other people that same opportunity to get into ownership, to be their own boss, to liberate themselves from the 9 to 5, whatever their reason is. And Franzy is a platform to help people do that.
Sure. Well, kind of a good segue then. So if part of Franzy's mission is to, deliver those million entrepreneurs, can you talk a little bit about the process and the platform of Franzy, how it's organized as a way to help those with that spirit actually go through a structured process to find the match if there is there, right? Because I think we believe that Franzy is the best option out there to find the match if there is one for you. So how does Franzy, the company and the platform, help pull that entrepreneurial spirit out of others and, arrive at success?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of good ideas, and I'm biased calling Franzy a good idea, as they originate from some sort of problem. And as a franchisor, we saw firsthand how prospective franchisees due diligence, how they search for the right fit. And it was so like 1980s, good old boys club, very backwards, limited inventory, overly excessive fees being charged behind the scenes without any disclosure or reporting requirements. And so with Franzy, the idea of democratizing ownership, it's how do we show an individual the whole universe of brands, just like going to Zillow and seeing every house for sale in your area, without distilling or diluting the quality of service that you can get, as far as what questions do I ask in the sale process? How do I finance myself and get capitalized? How do I form my entity? Where do I form my entity? What type of entity do I form? All these things that everyone has to go through. We want to make it as, less intimidating as possible, as accessible as possible. And so Franzy has the largest data set powered by AI in franchising, that I'm aware of. I don't think there's anyone doing anything similar to what we're doing. So when you come to Franzy, you're getting the whole buffet of 4,000 plus brands that an individual can't possibly know or remember or recommend legitimately. So the AI starts to curate based on your individual unique financial preferences, risk tolerance, goals and interests, and then your operational background. We take that information and then use our data set of 25,000 plus franchise disclosure documents, census data, Bureau of Labor Statistics data to say, hey, here's Alex's top 5. And, we might be, right on that first iteration, but the goal then is to work with a human being at that point to go through the process to say, let's iterate once, maybe 2 more times until we start to really hone in on the right fit. Because that's the most critical part. Just like buying a home, you're about to be in this for at least 5 years. You want to make sure that the match is a good match. And that's where I think the current process today does a disservice to people wanting to get into ownership.
Right. And with that brand selection, right, most brands have 100 or less locations, right? And so the ones that people recognize driving down the street are often national, sold out. And so how could it be possible outside of a Franzy for someone to find these diamonds in the rough, these lesser known brands because they're not on every street corner, but actually do have a phenomenal fit with these individuals, their budget, their interests, their passions, all of that. So no, that's great. So kind of going back to Another Nine and the brand selection, right, makes me think of our other teammate, Vivek Shah, right, who's a franchisee and a military fighter pilot. He is a franchisee himself, but he found that pre-Franzy, and it took him 8 months to find the right brand. And when he joined us, he would say, hey, it would have taken me a few weeks to find the right fit, not a few months, right? So when you found Another Nine, how did you find Another Nine, and how would that process have changed had Franzy been live?
Yeah, so I got a little bit lucky. I think that's what is happening traditionally is people come across an emerging brand through luck. A friend told them about it. It's very kind of serendipitous and not structured. And our goal again with Franzy is how do we take something and make it more predictable, more accessible, more obvious, and easy again to get into. And so my story is also part of the reason why we're doing Franzy is to create that access. But for me, it was my business partner on Another Nine stumbled across it off of like a Instagram post or something that he saw from them, reached out to them, said he was curious about what they were doing to franchise. And then we started that conversation of, well, we'd be interested in Minnesota. We'd be interested in Charlotte. So it happened how I think the majority of some of these emerging brand deals happen today, but that excludes 95% plus of the population that would also want to go and do this, but don't know where to start, don't know how to start, don't know who to reach out to. Franzy fits that gap.
Right. And this is definitely the long play to reduce that handicap, but I appreciate the dedication and investment in it. So mentioning your business partner, right? That's a great point. We get a lot of questions of, what is the ideal profile, or is there an ideal one of kind of the makeup of the ownership team, right? So, in my experience, we talk to people who are, individuals, others work with their spouse, others are silent partners just on the capital side, and others are operational partners. So, tell us a little bit about the dynamic in your situation, and is that what people should look for, or is there real flexibility in kind of what this ownership model could look like for people?
So one of the things I fell in love with about franchising is that there really is something for everyone, whether it's, hey, I can only afford $50K and it's a Card My Yard franchise where I'm putting yard signs out and, into people's yards and it's kicking off 30 grand a year in revenue and it's more of a side hustle, all the way up to $5 million investment costs, swim schools where I have to build 8 pools, but it generates a lot more revenue on an annualized basis. And then everything in between, whether it's investment cost or level of operational experience. And so we meet individuals that are really good at sales, but they might not want to manage a 15 crew of hourly employees because they don't have that experience, or it just doesn't fit their personality type. But the great thing is there likely is a number of brands, dozens of brands that still fit that unique individual's preferences, goals, needs, operational experience, risk tolerance, etc. And so that's what I've learned to love about franchising and what Franzy again aims to capture. So I do think, and I saw this, I think we all have friends that are like this, colleagues, coworkers, et cetera, where you're going out to lunch or getting a drink with them and you hear the story over and over. I want to do my own thing. I've always wanted to, but I don't know where to start. There's these hidden fears, I think, that honestly are very easily overcomable. But there isn't the education out there. There isn't the ability to do the research to identify this is the right fit for me. And so that's what I've learned to love about the idea of finding the right fit. And then if you want a partner, same thing. You could start the search and then talk to the brand, and the brand likely has someone that could complement your skill if you're looking for a partner, if you need capital, or if you need an operator. A little bit of a teaser, but Franzy hopes to one day pair operators with capital on the platform because that tends to happen a lot.
Makes total sense. So with you, exploring, knowing franchising, and I think a lot of people, when they approach franchising, they're uncertain of whether it's a good fit. And I think a lot of that is their uncertainty of whether they're going to be able to get all their questions answered, right? And a lot of people express, really long timelines, but a lot of that is kind of a proxy for, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get the answers and make this a sure fit, right? So for you and Another Nine, how did you, overcome, fears you had about kind of taking the plunge? And how did you know that this was a brand to move forward with? What boxes were checked? How did you know it was a good fit versus pausing or kind of removing yourself from the process?
Yeah, so I'd say take a step back. In general, franchising has an 85% success rate over a 5-year period compared to a 50% failure rate for independent businesses. So that immediately gives me peace of mind that I'm joining a system that has, even if it's an emerging brand, some level of proof already that, hey, this location, even if it's one location, has done well. And to me, that's enough evidence that I can go repeat this, because at the end of the day, the majority of the success is derived off of the individual franchisee. How good am I going to be at finding the right site, operating the business? And of course, I have these playbooks and support, which give you a huge leg up and set of shortcuts. But I gain confidence knowing that it starts and stops with me. Like, no one's going to come save me at the end of the day. I'll have support again and maybe a life, raft handed every once in a while. But I get comfort knowing that I have way more control than it may seem. And so when I was looking at another 9, it could have been another 9 or a dozen other concepts. Of course, others have higher propensity for success or better fit based on my background, what I like. And so I was really just looking for something as passive as possible that had good trends. Golf is taking off more than it ever has, with Full Swing on Netflix and Stadium Golf with Tiger Woods and Rory. And there's this revitalization, I think, of the sport, kind of like what Netflix did to Formula One. So I like the societal trends. I like that it was passive. It was a relatively low investment cost to get into. The revenue potential, fit this kind of nice passive. Especially if you get into multi-unit ownership, could build a nice portfolio kicking off cash every year. And so it really just checked all of those boxes for my unique set of goals, risk tolerance, etc.
It's great. And I might add to that, with those tailwinds of golf, right? Top Golf and, another 9, right, really make getting into the sport accessible, right? It's kind of a, no judgment zone. You don't have to be a course member, take 4 to 5 hours, permission from the home front, right? You go to Top Golf, you see kids, you see families, you see older people. And, that's a big part of another 9 as well, is the demographics are wide, with the hours being 24/7. I think, Ethan mentioned that surgeons, get out of the Mayo Clinic, and to de-stress, they do 3 a.m., play band for Pebble Creek, Pebble Beach, those type of things. So,
and that's truly private. You're in private bays, and you could be a hack and in there working on your knee with no one looking at you at the driving range, no one judging you on the golf course. You're truly in this dedicated room with a state-of-the-art golf simulator, playing any course you want in the country for $30 an hour. And the average golf sim round, I think, is like 90 minutes. So you're in for, I don't know, $40 to $60 with either yourself or 4 friends, whatever it may be, having, your own fun at your own pace.
That's great. All right. So we've covered so far your background, belief in franchising, the entrepreneurship spirit that we want others to feel, the brand selection and why. So now let's kind of get into tactical, right? So sign the agreement. What happens then, right? What are the next steps?
Yeah, so typically, as you go and find the right fit with a brand, you're going through their, I wouldn't even say sales process. I like to call it a mutual evaluation process, because you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. Do they want to work with you the next 5 to 10 years, and vice versa? So once the fit's been established and you see yourself, running this business, you sign the franchise agreement, and then you get to work. It's form the entity, figure out how you're going to do bookkeeping. And a lot of the kind of hang up, or the longest part of this process, if it's a retail business mainly, is site selection. That is the one part that I emphasize over and over and over again, is you can't move the building once you've signed a 5 to 10 year lease. I mean, you could be very expensive. And so you've got to be right about that. And that's where you really got to lean on the brand's expertise and what they're recommending as far as square footage, average rental rates, what kind of things should you negotiate, like free rent or tenant improvement allowance, TIA, and then using a local broker to also understand, is there gentrification happening, or complementary businesses that are coming in that I want to be around, or competitive businesses coming in that I want to distance myself from, or maybe purposely choose to be by to outcompete them and take their customers. There's a lot of strategy and thought that goes into the site selection. And so that's one of the immediate next steps, is beginning, and honestly, even as you're going through the mutual evaluation process, to start thinking about locations, knowing it could take 3 to 6 months just to identify the right one. And so when people are urgently trying to get into a business, I also like to set expectations that this whole match part, as long as you feel confident in yourself and you're mostly confident in the business, you can make, lemonade out of lemons, and you can figure out some of the, issues if it's, maybe an emerging brand or a more mature brand. Site selection is going to be one of these things that truly could make or break you. And that's where I encourage people to spend a lot of their time pre-signing and immediately post-signing.
We get a lot of questions about that. So for site selection, and you went through this a lot with LaundryLab, right, with the importance of it, is a franchisee left in the deep end with no life raft, or do brands support in this identification of sites?
So it's kind of a two-part answer. The mistake I've seen a lot of franchisees make is they get over their skis, or they get overly excited and they just want to go. I want to be open. I want to be open. They've now made this big decision. They're over the hard part of mentally deciding, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to bet, some sum of money to open this business. And the mistake they made is them getting way too urgent. Like, okay, the first site that comes up, they fall in love with. And I tell people there should be way more skepticism and thoughtfulness around the site than even the brand that you choose to work with. The site is so critical. And so some franchisees will, even at the franchisor telling them, I wouldn't do this site, or hey, slow down or whatever, this is the one I want to do. And it puts franchisors in a weird position because they ultimately want and need every franchisee to be successful. If they're not, it damages their brand, their reputation, etc. But a lot of emerging brands, especially, we made this mistake. We have very urgent, excited franchisees, and you don't want to tell them no 15 times in a row. And so eventually you're like, look, they're also adults making their own decisions. If they're comfortable with the risk and they're comfortable with this location, who's to say we have a crystal ball to know if every site is magically going to work or not? And so eventually brands will just, not at the franchisee's detriment, but they'll say yes. So there's that camp that gets overly excited. There's the other camp that knows, hey, I'm buying into a system because they provide value and resources, and they lean in and use every tool. They listen to recommendations. They're very coachable. And I say site selection is kind of a three-legged stool. You've got the franchisor who knows a lot about the business itself. What complementary businesses should you be by? What square footage should the business location be? What things should you negotiate? What demographics do you want to be around, et cetera. They're good at that because they know their business and their customer, but they might not know Denver versus Houston versus Minneapolis. And so that's where the second leg of the stool comes in, and that comes down to your local broker's knowledge. And another mistake that's made here is people will use their cousin or their neighbor down the street who, oh yeah, they've sold 30 homes last year. And it's like, that's very different than a commercial real estate lease, market research, site selection, negotiating with that kind of landlord versus a home, someone selling a home. And so they make the mistake of just using what's convenient again versus what's the right tool for the job. And so the second leg of the stool to me is the right broker using market knowledge, telling you those trends, able to negotiate with a landlord for you. And the third and final step is yourself. You need to know when you're getting in your own way. You also need to know when to ask for help, but you also know what you can afford, what you're comfortable with, how big you want to bet. Do you want to go 5,000 square foot location or 3,500 square foot location? And then also your market knowledge and your preferences. Do you want to drive an hour to this location every day potentially, even though it could be the best thing for the business? Or are you prioritizing more convenience for yourself and lifestyle, but it might be a slightly riskier site and you're willing to make that decision? That's where those kind of more emotional decisions, but also your gut and kind of intuition comes into play for the third leg.
That makes sense. And you touched on something with the second leg there, which is the specialization of the brand's knowledge and using partners for site selection, right? And that extends, to other parts of the franchise process. Franchising being as big as it is in the U.S., there's a lot of specialization, be it CPAs, attorneys, as well as real estate, right? And kind of the same thing, there's patterns in these models. And so, part of what we recommend is, to your point, not hiring a divorce attorney for a franchise agreement review, right? And making sure that the CPA understands the economics and reporting structure when it comes to, getting back to the franchisor. So that was a really important leg too that could also be extended to other parts of the process. Okay, wonderful. So, kind of bridging all those together. So, you're getting stuff ready to go after signing. You've got a business partner. So being a busy CEO, right? What does the division of labor look like between you and your partner as you run Franzy and get these locations off the ground for another 9?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that Dan is very much like 80% of the boots on the ground. He's looking at sites in Minnesota. He's up there now permanently. he's talking to architects, he's talking to GCs, and him and I typically meet, once a week, and we just talk through progress, where things are at. I might need to help build out a financial model, or provide supporting documentation for us to get our loan secured. We might go back and forth on which things in the lease we want to negotiate. So it's like cursory reviews of documents. But it's good to have a partner, again, in this situation where you might have a 100-hour-a-week demanding job. Startups like having, I feel like a baby or multiple babies at the same time. And so having in that situation a partner is key. And, I look at it like maybe a couple hours a week. I think if I was working at EY like I used to, I think I could easily commit 10 to maybe even 20 hours a week into this and could do a lot of this on my own if it was another 9.
Sure. And given that you and Dan are multi-unit, right? So this day-to-day is for location 1, and then it will go, 2 and beyond. So, what is it typical when someone buys multi-units? We get the question a lot of, do I open them all at once? So you've got the day-to-day now you just described, but what will that look like in terms of the speed of opening the other locations, and how does that day-to-day differ, leading up to 2, 3, 4? Are you able to scale, rinse and repeat? Does it get a little easier? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I always tell people, if they're going for wealth creation versus just additional income, you can't really do that with just one unit. One unit might be nice supplemental income, but you're probably going to have to keep your 9 to 5, unless it's you knock it out of the park, one of these very hot concepts that can replace and then some your full income. But the fastest way to wealth generation is multi-unit, and it makes sense to do because the first one, like anything, is going to be the hardest. You have to go through site selection for the first time. You have to find the right GC. You've got to train your initial staff. You've got to figure out the operation, the go-to-market and marketing. But once you have one, you have the relationships and a better understanding of what it's going to take for 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so the second and third and fourth and fifth become incrementally easier. I've heard, and I've seen this happen, that going from like 6 to 10, though, gets very challenging because you're starting to take, you are the GM basically for those 4 or 5 locations. You've got maybe assistant managers at each, location. But once you go from 6 to 12, you can't be in all those locations now. And so learning how to fully remove yourself from that like in and on the business stage is tricky for people. But I think 0 to 6 is, it gets incrementally easier, and it's the best path forward to wealth, generation.
It's great. And we're actually working on right now a calculator that helps people understand those economies of scale, those benefits of growing. And because a lot of people come to us with this, take home pay goal, and it becomes an equation of, okay, well, which brands, or, how many units do I need to achieve that? And so that's an area where, as people start with the goal that they're seeking, that we can help them back into that, All right. So to close it out, I'm going to shoot 4 rapid fire questions your way. All right. So the first one, what do people totally get wrong about franchising?
I think that it's just McDonald's and Subway. I've learned the not the hard way, but just have learned by being in this industry that there are 4,000 brands out there. 75% of them are considered emerging, meaning they have less than 100 units open or sold. And there's everything from early childhood development and education to health and wellness. There's a franchise for helping you move when you buy, when you sell your house, getting it staged, and then when you move, packing it up, and then helping the buyer come in. Like, I would have never thought there were franchises for some of these things. And so I think people get wrong that it's only McDonald's, it's only Subway, and it's going to cost me $3 million to get into. I'll never be able to do that. The reality is the average franchise costs, $250,000, and it's, again, much more accessible, and you can build $1 million business for a fraction of what you thought it might cost you to get into the game.
Yeah. And lending and SBA especially is a big part of that. And so another area where Franzy helps is making sure that we understand the full all-in investment, but also there are avenues to help, and many people use, including high net worth, high liquid individuals, still love to use leverage as a way of retaining that liquidity, but being able to start their dream. So, all right, question number 2. What is one thing about the franchise industry that totally frustrates you?
Oh, I mean, gloves are off, I guess, but like the broker process. As a brand, we were paying out 60% commissions to franchise brokers, and then one of the issues with franchising is there's no disclosure requirements, so there's not enough regulation around buying the business. So if you think about buying a home, If you're going to use a real estate agent, they have to be licensed in that state. They've had to have done hours and hours of coursework and passed an exam. They got to renew that, license and coursework. But buying a business that could be $500,000 to $1 million plus, just as big of a purchase with actual risk built into it, there's zero regulation like that. So you and I, boom, we can be franchise brokers in this moment without any, licensure, without any coursework. And that frustrates me that, and I'm not a huge proponent of regulation by any mean, but it frustrates me that there's an area in our world around entrepreneurship and ownership that is the Wild West, and the government hasn't stepped in and said, hey, in order to be a broker, you have to act as a fiduciary, you have to pass this course, you have to do these things, because people are making huge life decisions blindly, not knowing the person helping them is actually very incentivized, especially by certain brands, to push you towards those concepts when it might not be in your best interest. I have brokers that are good friends, and so this isn't all just a bash on that group. I'm more upset that the system is structured the way to create kind of perverse incentives that shouldn't be there. So I'm most frustrated about that. And again, with Franzy, we're trying to put a spotlight on that, be much more transparent and aligned with both the brand and the prospective franchisee than what's been happening historically.
Awesome. All right. Last question. What is a piece of advice that you would give someone looking at franchises right now, other than visit Franzy? Because that's obvious.
I think the biggest hurdle that people run into is themselves, and that's whether that's franchising, buying a short-term rental, investing in crypto, buying an independent business. It doesn't have to be franchising. My advice would be just start. It's cliche, but Nike got it right. It's like, just do it. Just start doing the research, start putting yourself out there, jump into the pool and start swimming a little bit. And you'll be amazed by how much you learn, how much confidence you build. And next thing you know, you might be running a business happier than you've ever been doing something for yourself than for somebody else.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate the time today, Alex. This was our CEO, Alex Smereczniak of Franzy, also a franchisee and franchisor. So I'll put a shameless tag in. That is, if you are curious about franchising, come visit Franzy, get to talk to me or our team, and we'll walk you through education, discovery, and support. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Good?
Yeah, man, you should host these things.
I went off script a little bit, but I was just kind of running with it, so I got to jump in the car. Thank you.
Thanks for